Hello and welcome everybody to today's Training Industry Learning Tech Showcase AI in Training, sponsored by ELB Learning, GP Strategies, Is Easy, Lemonade, LXP, and Litmos. So I'm Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So if you haven't already, please open those chat windows and let us know where you are joining us from today. Throughout today's event, we will be using this chat window to interact with our speakers with any comments, as well as questions. Drop those in the chat. This will be a very interactive, jam-packed session, so please drop those questions throughout as we try to address them all during this demo. And at the end of your time here with us, you'll notice a short evaluation survey popped open in another tab in your browser, and we would appreciate your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow email from us that will include the link to the on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Learning Tech Showcase, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcasts. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media. So please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue this conversation. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker of today. Jeff Fissel is the Vice President of Technology at GP Strategies. And with that, take it away, Jeff.
Hi, Liz. You nailed that timing. You got this down right at the
Got
top
you.
of the hour.
I got
Uh, Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I am Jeff. I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President of Technology at GP Strategies, and I'm excited to walk you through what we're doing today at GP. So with that, let me have the first test of any good presentation, which is seeing if I can get the screen share to work. Liz, you able to give me a quick thumbs up? Are you able to see my slide?
fabulous.
I did it right. All right, we're off to a good start. So thank you all. So today we're going to talk a lot around how do you move beyond just the like I've typed something in ChatGPT and gotten a response. How do I actually start to scale those experiences? Gartner talks a lot about the hype cycles of how do you move past that innovation curve, the peak of inflated expectations through the trough of disillusionment, and how do you get to those promised productivity gains on that slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity that as they call it out there. And we're going to talk about some of the experiences we've had doing that at GP and how we've built that into our kind of products. So and spoiler alert, two of the big ways we're doing that is going to be high quality data inputs and the importance of that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about why data is so important and getting it structured right scales that. And then the idea of building agents with embedded expertise. Agents with structured outputs help you get to those reliable outputs where you're getting consistency in what you're doing as you're scaling this across your organization. So um, we hear quite often like there's some challenges, I'll say, with generic AI tools. And I'm going to use the word generic AI tools lovingly because they're super powerful. And what I mean by that are ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, the tools that are built to do really broad applications. And they kind of fall into these kind of three areas of where they sort of fall down. The first is too much data thrown into the mix. So I think there was this misconception of I can point AI at big pile of words and it will just figure it out. It turns out it does not do that consistently, and generating high quality structured metadata is really important to making RAG work well, or a lot of the other kind of Copilot Studio bots or other things like that. If you dump too much into it, you're not going to have reliable outputs of what's going on. The other two kind of group together of how do you get to higher quality outputs? And this is the kind of the mediocre output problem. I typed in, build me an assessment question. And it built, once I got past the party trick of watching it write all these words, it built what looked like a good assessment. But when I actually read the distractors, it was actually really bad at lying to me. It wasn't good at coming up with distractors, and it didn't have that expertise. Now, of course, it knows about instructional design. It's the large language model. It's been trained on all of that stuff. But how do I nudge it? How do I push it to make it think in the way of an instructional designer? And how do I give it expertise um, to help combat those mediocre outputs of what good looks like? So we're going to talk about that. The first is going to be around understanding your data. The data that goes in is so, so important. And I'm going to kind of walk through this really quickly. These slides are available. So again, we want to spend a lot of time in the demo today. But the first thing is knowing your data. This might be an obvious statement, but a lot of times people want to, hey, I want to point my AI bot at SharePoint. Cool. Or my LMS. Great. But as you know, like not all the data there is going to be of the highest quality or even correct. You might have old or out of date content there. And if you import all of it, AI is it's not going to understand, it's not going to know what right is. So understanding that's important. The context matters a lot. A lot of you might have tried to like load a SCORM package into ChatGPT or Copilot. It doesn't know what that is. It looks like code to it. So how do you kind of give it the context of what it's working with there? Managing the form factor of AI. Like what's the data? Is it all in tabular formats? Do I want to use a multimodal model to understand it? The format is going to matter, and understanding that's going to help you drive higher quality outputs. You want to be aware of bias. And I'm not just talking about bias in the sense that like all the bad stuff, everything's biased. We're not going to be able to remove that bias. So it's being aware of the bias and what a piece of content's trying to do, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's training, and make sure that you're aware of that as you start to prompt and build these agents around that data. This is one of my favorite ones. Not all wrong data is wrong. We've had many people that, let's say, import learning content and there's assessments in there. The majority of assessments are wrong information. And if we're not careful, AI can grab that and assume it's fact if you don't tell it to ignore that part of it. So think about it as you're starting to load content in. And then everyone's trying to mitigate hallucinations, and you can mitigate them. You're never going to eliminate them because again, it's grabbing facts, and you want to start to anticipate where it might grab two true statements and try to not necessarily make up a new true statement. And I'll give you some examples of this as we kind of dive into it. Um, Everyone loves a good stat. I talked about Gartner earlier. So this is a rather high number in my opinion. But again, it is like a lot of time has to go into preparing and cleaning that data, of getting that right, so that you can do all the fun bits downstream that we're going to talk about more here. So again, don't dismiss that part. Focus on that. It's really, really important. So then when you get to the, okay, I have good data, how do I want to start to process it? That's where agents can come into play to help scale this output. And I'm going to share a lot of examples of these as we get into the demo here. But this is a diagram from Anthropic's website, but I think it kind of gives you this idea of a simple level what an agent can look like. It has a task, it has a goal, and it's designed to be able to complete that goal. And most agents have some sort of orchestrator function that's designed to understand the ask. It's then going to have a series of LLM calls, prompts, that are asking it to do segments of that. And then there's something that's going to bring it all together before it goes out. So a common example I like to say here is I want to take a video transcript. I want to take an hour-long video transcript, and I want to create assessment questions for it. Now I could just load that transcript into ChatGPT or Copilot and ask it to do it. But what you're going to end up getting is random facts of assessment questions. You might get an assessment question on what color shirt was the speaker wearing, or random things like that. But we know as instructional designers or people in this industry, to actually do this right, the first thing you should do is process that. The second thing is you should detect or generate learning objectives or outcomes that you want to use. And then you want to create these assessment questions to anchor to the learning objectives. So in theory, a lot of cases, they'll use data from a previous call to help get a higher quality output. So you can start to take the workflows that you're doing today and embed them into these agents to start to create a higher quality output. And then to get a little meta here, like agents can call themselves and review themselves. So building in those reviewer output steps becomes really important of what does a good solution look like, so that before a human ever sees it, you might have several iterations to tune that to get to a higher quality output. All right. So now that we have a high level on what we're going to kind of show you here, I want to talk about this idea of how can I generate better learning faster. And I didn't say more here on purpose because I do think we want to challenge ourselves to create higher quality experiences. So if we want to scale this, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start to use these parsing agents that we create to ingest and deconstruct the knowledge that we have today, whether that's existing learning content, standard operating procedures, videos, PDFs, learning content. I want to start to build these knowledge bases of trusted content to work off of, so that it's not guessing every time when it's trying to create new content. I want to give it vetted knowledge to work off. This becomes a great place for you to embed customer specific information, your own IP into these things, so that you can start to use that as part of the experience. And we call this kind of the knowledge base building layer. And it's really important and you can get a lot of value out of it. But I know a lot of people here are probably like, hey, I want to create more, better content. So how do I start to do that? And that's where I'm going to blow out the rest of this slide really quickly. That's where those agents can come into place. So, hey, I can take just the bits and pieces I want from up here, and I want to apply an output agent to help me write a video script of what a good video script looks like, or a content script for e-learning, or assessments, or just-in-time experiences, or co-pilot bots. All of those kind of things all become experiences. And where we come in is layering that expertise of what good looks like. Inside of GP, and I'm sure inside of your organizations, you have lots of good documentation on what does a good output look like in this in this world, and you want to embed those into that agent so that you can get consistent output. If everyone's prompting their own ways, sometimes you'll get good stuff, but then you might get really weird stuff other times as well. So structured outputs of what does a good output looks like really becomes a key differentiator to helping us create higher quality content faster. So I'll leave with one more stat here before we move into the demo. Again, IBM is saying here that the future here is if we can repurpose our own content, if we can start to do that, we can see a pretty significant acceleration and what we can do of creating that. So this is all about how can I repurpose that existing content? And I think AI is primed to help us do that in our world. So I don't see any questions so far, Liz, nothing in there. So with that, I'm going to hop into the demo. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in at any point. Let me stop sharing this, and I'm going to move over to my browser. All right. Liz, did I do that transition okay? You can
Looks
see
great.
my screen now?
Yes.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you all. Perfect. So this is GP's offering. We call it Content AIQ. It's a product that we built to address some of those issues we talked about because we were using all the tools that were out there. And we really needed our team of thousands of learning creators to be able to scale what I just walked through. What is built here is all built in the secure Microsoft tech stack. So using all the Azure services, every customer has their own dedicated instance and deployment so that there's no cross-pollination of data. Your data is never used for training or any of those sort of things. So you have all the security you would expect inside of a Microsoft environment, whether it's ours or yours, to be able to run the tools that I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to start with the least compelling part of it, but it's really important. That data part is, okay, let's start to load data into the system. So the first thing you do is whether you do this via bulk, connect it in an API, load stuff in manually, or even kind of link to data and say, hey, every week I want you to go to this URL and grab the latest stuff that is there. we're going to start to load and process that data. We're going to do a lot of learning specific stuff in doing that. So the first thing we're going to do is, again, detect all of the topics and content that's covered across in that, keywords, weighting of what's going on within that, learning objectives in a terminal and enabling kind of structure. And as this is doing this, I'm going to switch over to just sort of a slightly the same thing I showed you, but I want to make it just so it's easier for people to see. The type of metadata we're sort of generating. So if I'd say I load in an hour-long video here, what we're actually generating, I'll kind of scroll through it, is going to be skill tags of what's going on, learning objectives with, in every case, excerpts and justification of why it associated it with specific moments. You always want to kind of link things down. Um, Speaker information. So we want to understand who is the person, what are they talking about, if it's in video, the justification of that, and then a really detailed outline. Since this is video, it's all time-based of what is being covered within that piece of content. So you want to have that really deep index and understanding. I see a question that already came in. Can you do this for SCORM files? Absolutely. We've built the adapters to do that. I think I have one here. This is an asynchronous e-learning. So yes, you have the ability to process all of that. Of course, in an outline of one of those, time is not really relevant. We just do an automatic time thing so we can keep track of it. But you start to have an idea of what's being covered within that content. So this is building that really deep understanding of the content that exists in the library. And that's really important so that when you start doing retrieval augmented generation tasks, the stuff that agents like to do, you have the ability to grab the right content to work with. So that metadata and understanding of the content becomes really powerful. Now, of course, you can probably imagine there's a good amount of value you could get out of that. You can start to do some analysis of overlapping, kind of saying, hey, where is my content over indexed? Where do I have not enough content? Where do I do certain things? So you can do a lot of really great analysis of that content once you understand what's going on within it. But the topic of this presentation is to talk about scaling the creation of it. So files are great, and most AI tools today allow you to upload files to do things with it. But as we mentioned in that data thing, files can have wrong information in them. So how do I start to raise that up and kind of get a benefit from that? And that's where we introduce this concept of knowledge bases. So I'll stick with this accountability theme here. I can create a knowledge base off of groups of files. So I can start to associate these together. So this is an accountability course that we have, and I've taken in the ILT deck, the VILT deck, all the participant information, all the content that we have for delivering. I think this is like a 3-day accountability course. I've loaded in there. We use a series of content detection kind of agents to understand what are the core topics that are covered across all of that content. So you're starting to theme this stuff together. And then we actually break out exactly what that information is and allow this to be human editable. So this allows me to come correct anything that it might have gotten wrong before we go start downstream creating new content. Um, this becomes really valuable as well as kind of a virtual subject matter expert. So let's say I'm a design and development structural engineer or systems designer. I'm kind of building a course here and I have questions about something technical. I can say, what are the core principles of the X model? And I can ask questions, and based only on this information, this will answer it for me. This does kind of two things for me. One, if this is really technical information, it helps me scale my resources of having to go back to the subject matter expert and things like that. But also, this helps me validate the information because I can say, hey, if this is a correct answer, great. If it's not, I can say, oh, it got it from this knowledge base in this topic in this entity, and I can go correct that information before I go start creating new downstream products. So that's again a really powerful way of being able to do kind of a semantic search across these knowledge bases and to be able to understand what's going on within it. So now we're happy. I've created my knowledge bases of content that I want. we can move on to a concept that we call workspaces, where I can start to ground my what I want to work on specific areas. I'll stick with this accountability theme. So inside here, I've said, hey, in here, I only want you to work off of this knowledge base and these files. So if I ask you to create a course on American history, it's going to come back and say, I don't know what that is. And that's part of scaling the use of AI is grounding it on very specific information that you're going to work on. And again, not just giving it access to the whole library every time. So let's say I do want to chat and I want to have it help me come up with ideas for in-person activities. Again, you can do those kind of chat experiences right here. Again, grounding it back and anchoring it back to those specific moments. And maybe, okay, this found it on page 20 in the workbook of what's there. So you're always kind of anchoring back to that truth so you can feel really confident in what you're building here. But then you start to have these output agents. So let's say I want to create a new video script for an intro video. And that's when we'll get into kind of our agent workflow. And our video script agent here is set up to say, hey, before I go off and start writing a script, tell me some things. I don't have this information. Who's this for? What's the target audience? What's the treatment? Things that we know are going to create a higher quality video script. So I can give it an answer to some of these questions at a high level. It will process that answer. And then if it needs more information based on that, it will come back and ask me those questions. So we've built a feedback loop into that agent so that it continues to do that. In this case, it was happy with it and it's going to go start writing this content. So as this is doing this, I want to show you a little bit behind the scenes of what these kind of agents are starting to look like. Now, this isn't an agent, this is a series of prompts, but let's say I'm creating a podcast script. Again, in all of this, we're giving it a role, we're giving it the job, we're giving it the narrative, the audience, the task. Again, embedding those specific instructors. But this is the key I want to call is like what structured output looks like. What does a speaker role have? What are the instructions? What are the mindsets? What are the writing styles? We're even telling it to use valid utterances to like make it more human and nudge it in the right direction. We're giving it rules of how we want it to respond, a structured format of the output, and then a checklist of what it's doing. So this is a series of agents that are kind of doing this workflow whenever we're starting to generate a podcast script. And this is the type of expertise that you want to kind of build into these agents as you continue to build them. So if I pop back here, now we have our title and description. You can see our scenes that have been created with the visual cues and the narration of what's going on. I could continue to iterate with this if I liked it. I could ask it to change it or tweak it. But I can, in this case, let's assume this is a good one. And I want to send it. I have this connected to my Colossian account. So I can click send to Colossian, and it's going to go ahead and create a synthetic video and audio based on this for me. So as this is doing this, I'm going to take a quick second and look through the questions and chats. Question on the video output, did you format this yourself? Yes or no. This is all built into what an agent should have. So this outline is built in of what does good look like. So it does it every time without having to prompt it every time to do that. Oops. And then we have a question about multiple languages. Absolutely. You can ask this. So language is actually a really interesting one of like, you could ask this to generate this. I could ask it to write this script, let's say in Brazilian Portuguese, and it would write it with that in mind. So it's localizing it. Or let's say I do go and I click, I want to go to Colossian now to see this, and I'm happy with it. I could then do the translation at that moment as well. So now I have my video where it's created this scene where this woman's going to read my script that it loaded in here. It's created a couple other scenes for me of why this is important. Notice it's not perfect. Like there's still some things we're going to have to do to get the everything kind of right. But again, I took something that was a 3-day course and created a quick video in a matter of seconds here. And if I wanted to translate this, I could then add translation here as well. So there's a nuance to translation of, do I want to generate or do I want to translate at the end? And a lot depends on the use case of how you're using it. I would say in compliance oriented training where you want the exact thing said in every language, you're going to translate towards the end. At the end, like in this case, when I'm happy with it, I then translate it. But if I'm creating quick performance support type stuff and I want to get it out and I wanted to write it more with that in mind, I could generate in that native language, and then I don't have to deal with the traditional translation components. So again, a really, really powerful way. If anyone hasn't used Colossian, it's an amazing tool where again, I can create interactions, I can make branching scenarios, all of those kind of things I can do directly from AIQ with the Colossian integration we have built right in. So let me pop back here and I'm going to look to see if I have a couple other questions here. Um, which AI tool is this? So we're on the back end, we're using the Azure OpenAI services to do this, but the front end of this is the Content AIQ tool. I see Ken brought up a question around localization. So absolutely. So the localization is, hey, I want to write this in Japanese, to your point, and I want you to account local customs. I would prompt it to do it in Japanese with all of that in there. So it's natively writing it with that in mind versus doing a string for string translation at the end. So I think that might case. So, and then there's a question from Nick of, yes, this right now in this moment, what I'm showing you is this tool would be used by learning creators to scale the learning creation function of what you're kind of doing. And then one last question here, proprietary data, Azure. Yeah, so this is all built in the Azure tech stack. So it's your data is your data. It's safe. You can feel confident that what you're creating, you own the outputs of because of how it's being structured. So again, you can feel really confident of the security and systems. And we're happy to share technical documentation of all of those sort of things. Um, so let me kind of show a couple other things. Assessments have been real popular. Of course, I want to generate assessment questions, distractors, all of those sort of things, and maybe I want to export that. Course outlines. Again, I want to kind of rethink generating a new course, the topics, the breakdowns, the learning objectives for each specific area. And then maybe I want to send that to PowerPoint because I want to continue to iterate on it. Or maybe I want to build out a course script for a VILT session where I want to know, hey, suggestions for things that are go on different slides, and I want you to create a draft PowerPoint for me. So take that and send it to PowerPoint. So the goal here is that we're not the publishing tool. This is the kind of middleware where it's helping you take your unstructured learning data, make sense of it, and then apply best practices and standards to it so that you can start to create higher quality learning experiences at scale inside of the tool. The last bit that I'll call out is a lot of people want to build chat experiences, and building end learner chat experiences is something you want to do on grounded information. So that's where we added this concept of interactions. So I have the ability to create interactions, in this case, just a chat one, but this is kind of designed to be almost like your little mini GPTs or Copilot Studio kind of things, but grounded on just this information. I can give it a name. I can say, hey, I only want this to be embedded in this area. I can give it a system prompt. I can give it characters it can use. And if I go look at an existing one, all this really generates for me is an embed code that I can take and go put in my e-learning, put anywhere on my SharePoint, in Teams, anywhere I need to, that people can have the ability to start to chat and interact with this accountability content and stay ring-fenced just in this area. So again, super exciting. I could spend hours going through all the other things that are here. But I do want to kind of click back to the slide and I want to respect the time that we have. So let me kind of click back to my slide deck really quickly, and then I'll also take a look and see if there's any other questions that are kind of popping in here. All right, so we went through the demo here. This was an example of kind of, I think someone brought up ADDIE or different workflows. I challenge you to rethink the design workflows and not just apply AI to ADDIE. And this was an example of, hey, how can I help refactor long form content? And This was, hey, take that long form video, use AI to create the summaries, the chapters, the segments, have a human apply those edits to it, have AI generate the content that would go into the course, have an instructional designer put that into a Rise template and do all that part of it, then review and deliver. So you can start to change the processes and rethink that workflow. Um, and I'll skip this slide. One of the things I like to, our chief learning officer, Matt Donovan, talks a lot about this idea of intelligence versus wisdom. AI is going to beat us hands down in intelligence. It knows all of those. It knows way more than we do. The wisdom is what we bring to the table. And this was a quote from a rugby player saying, intelligence is knowing tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And I want to challenge us to think about like what the role we play and how we can apply that wisdom into these agentic architectures that we build to scale what we're doing and not just do more of what we're doing today. So with that, I'll pause and see if we have a time for any other questions that we have coming in here. All right. How long, what types of resources. You can load pretty much any resource you want into the system, PowerPoints, videos, all of that sort of stuff. We do have an agent coming for branching. So I'd love to show you that. It's really cool. Some of the branching scenarios it's working with. Yes, GP does provide, not, we have our own IP, leadership knowledge, all of that sort of stuff. So yes, we can sell you AIQ with content loaded in, technical skills, leadership content, things like that, that you can create derivative art from. So, whew, Liz, this was a whirlwind, but a fun one.
Yeah,
I'll go ahead and stop sharing because I think I'm right at time.
you are. Well, with that, I know you needed a moment to like take a breath. That was a lot. So with that, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience today before we take our first break?
No, I would say rethink the workflows. Just don't apply AI to the same workflow you're doing today. Think if there's different ways you can do things, and challenge yourself to kind of get in there and start playing with some agents. Start creating little GPTs or Copilot Studios, or give us a call if we can help you with that. We're building custom agents all the time inside of this framework, and we'd love to help support you do it. So, Liz, thank you again for having us, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with everyone.
Yes, yes. I dropped your LinkedIn in the chat. So for those
Yes,
questions
please.
that we didn't get addressed, you can immediately poke Jeff. If not, the team will be reaching out to you guys shortly in a couple of days. But thank you, Jeff. No, this was a fabulous session. A great way to kick it off today.
Thank you all.
Yes. And so for that, anyone who is new here, we are going to be taking roughly about a 15-minute break. Up next, we have Paul joining us from Litmos for their session, Unlock Learning with the AI-powered LMS from Litmos. So in a moment, I'm going to end this session, and you can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. So please stick around for our next session, which will begin shortly. Soon. Bye, everybody.